Good afternoon and welcome back to Whimsical Farm, to the Garden of Weedon. Today is a special video day, short and sweet, but I want to focus on wood chips, namely the kind that we got from the power company when they came out to do some work on the trees around the power lines. So we want to focus on these. You'll notice that this entryway bed here that my wife has just built, part of that's wet, part's dry, but that is covered with a very heavy-duty geotech fabric, stapled down tight all the way around, so no real chance of weeds, but yet right on top of it you'll see a dose of wood chips, leaves, mulch. I'm a big believer in these wood chips. They are going to act in many different ways and do many different jobs, but you can see here that I've clearly got that covered. It's not 100%. I left the edges showing so that you can see that it's got that geotech in place. Hey girl. And we're going to go into the garden and just focus on wood chips today. So here we go. Got two buddies out here that came to see me. There's Mr. Kaiser and Sasha. That's our guard dogs. They'd like to come in here and dig in these beds and check them out, but not today, buddy. Not today. Maybe in the fall when we need it dug up. So this next bed is a grape bed. It's a 3x3. Again, notice the heavy-duty geotech fabric in place, stapled down, no chance of weeds. But on top of that is a bunch of chips. Who would put a bunch of weed-suppressing chips on top of something that's already 100% weed protected? Well, that's me. And the purpose of this is several-fold. Number one, if you've ever laid against something like a black car or been out in a blacktop road in the broiling heat when it's 90 degrees, it just burns you down. So the first job that these chips are going to do is they're going to moderate temperature. Instead of being that real bad news black that is so rough in the summertime, when the sun is shining, it's a nice brown. And these are wet. I've wet them down with a hose to help with temperature control and also to keep that plant watered. So two things it does. Number one, it keeps the heat at bay. And number two, it acts as a sponge sitting on top holding that moisture in. So after you water, it slowly gives water from the top down to your plant. Now it doesn't mean it's going to last forever. It may only provide it for an hour or two, just a little bit of moisture, but it's very good to have. Now, let's take a look at these. You've seen these onions many times before. This onion patch, although they've been beat up by the wind, is a Bermuda patch. And I've been winning the battle against the Bermuda patch, getting the onions coming up, ready to eat by using wood chips. So it's excellent for weed suppression. Here is a bed that last week was completely weeds, and I didn't pull the weeds. These were all kinds of different weeds: Johnson grass, Bermuda grass, poke salad, you name it. And we just put the chips, just layered them over it and say forget about it. Now if they don't do the job, add more chips. Now here's another bed. Look at this bed right here. This one is another geotech fabric coated, and you see green coming up through there. My wife's done an excellent job. She got it spread out real good, and those are watermelon plants. So when the watermelons come up, they'll have a nice damp, soft place to lay, and they won't get scorched by the black geotech. Let's look at another one real quick, and then we'll talk about these chips. Here is a beautiful set of roses. If you just look back on the last video, this was nothing but weeds, all kinds of grass and weeds, and I'm talking about the kind, there's no way you get them all pulled out. You'd have to dig the whole plant up, redo the whole bed, but instead, we came in with a handful of chips. I'm gonna estimate the depth of those chips at about 3 inches. And some people will say to you, I'm gonna just tell you what some folks have said. They say, well, I put down some chips and my weeds grew right through them. Well, you got to add more chips. So well, I added a few more chips and the weeds still came right through. So well, make them 10 feet deep if you have to. and make them 100 feet deep. You won't get any weeds. You won't be able to grow weeds. They say, well, that's a lot, that's too much. Well, you get the point. It's that sometimes you have to go a little thicker. I use extreme sometimes, say 100 feet deep. Well, you're not going to go 100 feet deep. There's no way. But you kind of understand if 2 inches was barely doing it, you might need to double up. You might need to go 4 inches or maybe 6 inches. Now see this? This was a whole patch of weeds blended in with corn. Now you can see a few weeds here and there. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's sure a lot easier to bring a wheelbarrow out here with lightweight chips and throw a few down than it is to try to dig the whole bed up. Now look at this. You remember this bed? This one is a remarkable bed. I'm gonna get on this end where you can see it good. This has got small onions and big onions. Now these were planted, probably gonna put my shadow in here a little bit, but that's okay. These were planted from seed. She wants something that you can keep and dry up, and they just last longer. They don't rot like onion sets do. And you'll see some weeds in there. There's some terrible Johnson grass in there, but it's highly suppressed. These chips do a fantastic job. They also are going to break down over time and become a beautiful compost. So you can see that. These are pretty thick. See if I can show these. See, that's pretty thick chips, and there's a little bit of green underneath that, but we don't care. Just bring out another load of chips. These chips were free, and I'm happy with them. I love chips. If you can buy yourself a chipper shredder and you've got property that you can pull trees off of and you're doing some cleanup, that would be great. Now, I did this in a pattern here where you can just see. My wife said, stop, don't do the bed. Some of the little bean seeds are not up yet. So out of respect to her, I had to pump the brakes a little bit, but you can see what I've done. I've just sprinkled a little bit where there's no chance of me covering up one of the baby bean seeds. And as soon as those beans get up a little bit taller, I'll cover that thing. Man, it'll have 2 or 3, 4, 5 inches, maybe a foot deep in chips. And that will provide the extra moisture. It's basically like laying a sponge, but who could afford to buy a sponge that big for a 4x10 bed? But it'll give you all the advantages of a sponge, and even more so because as those chips break down, they will begin to make a manure tea, because those chips have some green leaves. When they cut those trees down, they ran the limbs through that machine, green limbs with all the green leaves on them. So it's not a perfect carbon to nitrogen ratio, and a lot of people know about that, but some people don't. C and N ratio, here's what that stands for, C/N. Carbon is all your dry, brown stuff that has very little, if any, nitrogen. That's your carbon. And your N stands for nitrogen. That's all your green stuff, like comes out of the back of a cow, back of a horse, back of a rabbit. Anything they ate that was green, or just regular greens, the leaves off the tree. Doesn't have to go through a cow, doesn't have to come out its tail. Green manures is any kind of green grass that's cut. So carbon to nitrogen ratio, I don't know exact number, but I know one thing. If you're going to do any serious composting, you got to have a little bit of each. You don't want to have a whole buggy full of wood chips and sawdust. That's terrible. You put just straight wood chips with no green around a plant, and that plant will just go into a pause because it'll begin to strip and look for nitrogen in the soil. That's not what we got here. This has got it all. It's got all the green leaves, all the green sap. These were cut during springtime last year and the year before, and they're just wonderful. So this, like I say, is a special video today. It's about wood chips. If you can get a hold of some of these, they make an excellent mulch. And remember the rule of thumb in your garden, you never want to leave any naked soil. So any soil that is not covered is going to have problems with erosion. It's not going to hold moisture. Worms are not going to want to be there. The list goes on and on. So thank you for being with us today at Whimsical Farm for a short story about mulched up wood chips and trees. And please get a hold of some of these for your garden. You can start building your soil. There's so many uses. You can use it for covering weeds, use it to moderate temperature, use it to hold moisture, and use it to make soil from scratch. So the list goes on, and probably the last one of the biggest, most important, is you can make worm beds. Worms love this stuff right here. So thank you for listening, and please hit the subscribe button. It costs you nothing, but it'll keep our channel going and kind of keep you up with what we're doing. So punch that subscribe and the like button for us, please. Thank you again for visiting us here at Whimsical Farm, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.